Hey, welcome everybody to the 40 Finance channel. Alibaba stock, let's talk about it. This is an interesting stock for me because I do not typically invest in standalone Chinese stocks. I do have some exposure in different ETFs that are in my retirement account. But I've gotten a lot of questions and comments about Alibaba stock and what is my projection for Alibaba going forward. So that's why we're doing this video. Obviously, it's a murky situation right now here in August. Chinese government has slapped several risks already over there as far as companies getting in trouble for data and privacy concerns. So it's really hard to tell if that was just a short-term roundup, so to speak, or if we're going to see more restrictions for Chinese companies going forward. However, for today's video, we're just going to take it for what it's worth today. We're just going to assume that the dust up that we've seen over the past month or so over there, as well as, international relations concerns as it pertains to, will Chinese stocks be available on the USA stock market? Really hard to tell, but we're just going to assume going forward that we are past this conflict, because it's impossible really to project where that's going. So we're going to stick with fundamentals, talk about Alibaba's business, and try to make a stock projection for the next fiscal year. Quick reminder, as always, that my stock picks and projections are just my opinion for your entertainment. However, if you enjoy stock market analysis like this, talking stocks, making price predictions for the future, please subscribe to the channel, give this video a like. Thank you to everybody. All right, we're coming off a fresh earnings report for Alibaba. EPS beats, misses on revenue, boosting the buyback. So that's the key headlines here. Non-GAAP EPS beats. GAAP EPS was not projected for Alibaba because they have a different accounting structure that they adhere to. Revenue plus 33% year over year. That was a miss to projection, but you can see that it was a relatively small miss in the neighborhood of 1 or 2% off the top of my head. And the big call out, we are increasing share repurchase from $10 billion to $15 billion, the largest share repurchase program in the company's history, because we are confident in long-term growth prospects. Some other business highlights. 939 million mobile monthly active users, representing a quarterly net increase of 14 million. And China retail marketplaces recorded solid physical goods GMV growth. That's gross merchandise volume, that reflects strengths in categories such as apparel, accessories, home furnishings, and electronics. And finally, annual active consumers reached 1.18 billion for the 12 months ended July 30th, an increase of 45 million from the 12 months that ended in 2021. All right, so similar in some ways to what we're seeing over in the United States on some of these big e-com earnings. There's a couple misses in there. I mean, they barely missed revenue, almost the same as Amazon. Amazon hit across the board. They barely missed revenue. Alibaba in the same place. So now let's take a look at the stock fundamentals and see what kind of value proposition we have for this one. All right, here's a quick look at the one-year chart, and you see how the price was at a peak somewhere in the neighborhood of 310. Now we're all the way down to 199. So that's where I get the majority of my questions. Is Alibaba a great value play right now? And unfortunately, you did have the death cross here. Moving average of 50-day crossed over the 200-day. And we haven't yet really found some support, although I do see a bounce back here. This is approximately the 185 range. And RSI of 44 is not awful. It's kind of flatlined from some of the activity that we've seen throughout the late spring. And don't forget that some of this lop off in price is also because of what's going on in the United States stock market as a whole. I mean, here's the 2021 peak. It's right on Valentine's Day week, and that's when everything else over here fell down a notch. So what we haven't seen, though, out of Alibaba yet, likely due to the international sort of controversy, is we haven't seen the bounce back up like so many American stocks who are arguably overvalued tech stocks. They have bounced back up. Alibaba hasn't. All right, so we know that Alibaba is certainly down in price. What about valuation, right? What happens when you switch gears and you get off of this number, which is $200, and you start thinking about, like, what is the company worth in terms of multiples looking ahead? Well, on a trailing standpoint, we have a PE of 24.13. That is certainly down from the peak Alibaba saw, let's call it 17 through 19, when trailing PEs were about 45. The interesting thing is that the forward PEs are not terribly far off of each other, dating back to 2016. So your forward PE today of about 21 or 22 is actually a little bit higher than you would have seen in March. And if we go back to, let's just say 2019, prior to COVID, you're riding about a 26, a 26, and a 25. So there's probably some room to run here, but forward PE in a vacuum doesn't insinuate that this one is horribly undervalued. Now, if we flip down to price to sales, this is a metric where you're starting to see some differences in Alibaba stock today, right? So 464 price to sales, that is definitely on a downward trajectory from what we've seen all the way back to 2015. And, you know, some of that could be because the price went down, and some of that could be because the valuation or the multiple that people want to pay is not as high anymore because of the murky waters that are out there. All right, so let's see what analysts are projecting here. Current year of 2022, Alibaba has a little bit different of a fiscal year. They run from April through March. All right, so last year, Alibaba made $10.05 on EPS. This is non-GAAP EPS. That's what they report in. Then we have estimates right now sitting at $9.70. So you have a decline in earnings per share. That's okay as long as you're going to pick it up the next year, which they look like they will be doing, 2023, $11.93. So this is going to give you a little bit of pause, though, on your trailing metrics, because they're actually temporarily going to go up in the wrong direction, right? Your trailing PE will actually increase at a certain point, but for purposes of this video, we're only looking ahead. We're going to assume today is today. We want to know about tomorrow. So this 1193 consensus that we have on the board right now, that's what we're going to work with. All right, let's take a look at revenue estimates. This year, revenue's looking good, plus 30%, about what you would expect out of a company like Alibaba. Last year, they did about $111 billion. That is going to jump up to $144 billion potentially this year. So big numbers, big increases. You'll see 30% on a lot of smaller companies, and it doesn't really add up to that much money. But when you start getting into these billions, plus 30% is certainly strong. Now, next year, next fiscal year, you do have a slowdown, at least from the projection standpoint, plus 20%. That's still good. You're going from 144 to call it 74, just for fun. You're still increasing $30 billion, and we saw up here that your EPS is increasing too. So they're doing exactly what you would hope for from an investment standpoint. Now, I'll show you something down here on why you're getting stuck in the mud if you're Alibaba. This is EPS trend. So this is how the consensus analysis is coming along. Current fiscal year, 90 days ago, the number was at $11, okay? Here we are 3 months later, it's down to $9.70, and it's fallen every step of the way. 2023, roughly the same deal. $13.24, coming all the way down to $11.93. Guys, it's only a 90-day stretch, right? A 3-month stretch. So when these numbers keep coming down, if you're an algorithm or you know, you're doing spreadsheets at home about your price to buy, this is going the wrong way over the past 90 days. Now, again, we're not supposed to think about things like the political turmoil when we're doing this exercise, but you just have to assume that that's part of what's going on here. All right, let's take a look at our EPS estimates for the next couple years. They're illustrated very well on Seeking Alpha, so that's what I'm using here. So fiscal period ending March of next year, that will technically be their 2022 fiscal year. It will end near the beginning of the year, so keep that in mind. We'll get results on this. The actuals about late April, May, something like that. Right now you're sitting at 965. Year-over-year growth, as we talked about, down this year. Forward PE, 2079. So that, again, is lower than what we've seen on forward PEs historically, but we have additional storm clouds right now. Then you look ahead to the next year, 1178. Year-over-year growth, 22% over the year before. Now we're going into a positive direction, and you see the forward PE, you know, sort of the 2-year look ahead starts to go down, which is exactly where you want to be as an investor. Now, on price to sales, this year, 32% growth is where the consensus sits right now, 143 billion. Forward price to sales under 4 at today's price. And then the next year, if you add 22% to that, you get forward price to sales dipping close to 3. All right, so from a forward price to sales, you know, we saw double-digit price to sales valuations not even 3-4 years ago with Alibaba. Now you're inching closer to 3. The company's maturing, but you still have nice growth prospects. I mean, even out into 2024, which I'd argue is almost too far ahead to think about, but you're still coming in strong, well over double-digit revenue growth there. So definitely heading in the right direction. All right, let's go over to TipRanks to see what the best performing analysts think about Alibaba stock. And we've got a nice run of updates here just a couple days ago because they had the earnings report. These are all best performing analysts. I filter that out so that there's no 2 or 3 star people chiming in. Got price targets, 300, 300, 250, 280, 275. Buys across the board, plus 50%. Plus 40%, heck, the low, this is going to be your low right here, 250, and this is over the next 12 months, 25% upside. So definitely a lot of positivity coming out for Alibaba after the earnings, at least from where today's price sits. Now let's take a look at the math behind my own price projection for Alibaba. All right, so here's what I've got on Alibaba. It's August 5th of 2021, price of $200, so rounded up a couple pennies there. The current forward PE, which we reviewed, is 21 right now. Multiply that by the end of the fiscal year EPS consensus projection, which I rounded up to 970 because technically on Seeking Alpha was 965. These things tend to flow up with good companies, and I'm giving Alibaba the benefit of the doubt. So 21 by 970 gets you roughly $200. Looking ahead from my vantage point, this would be for April or May of 2022, okay? Depending on when they release their earnings and confirm the results for the 2022 fiscal year, right? We're at the end, that would be at the end of March of 2022. We'll get that confirmation. but they will not publish it till they have their earnings call, April, May, something like that. At that time, I'm projecting a forward PE of 23. That's a couple points above where we are today. And my EPS projection is at 12 right now. I could easily see this going up to a 12.50 or 13 on the EPS projection, but where we are right now, it's just too cloudy, it's too murky. I'm still giving a slightly positive upside from where the consensus is. I think it's at 1170. I'm rounding up to 12. That gives you a price of 276 for April, May of 2022. That's where I see it. So still some nice margin. You're at 200 a day, 276 in the future. I am not going to be buying this stock myself. I will have some exposure in ETFs because it's just not something that I invest in. And you have to understand that there is risk, and there's sort of like political risk, which is horrible. But that's where we are on this one. You could argue the same thing in a totally different world. You could argue the same thing about your Googles and your Facebooks and your Amazons, not necessarily the same type of government regulations, but government regulation, aka politics, could come in and zap those companies here on American soil. So it's not like American companies are without the same risk. I just don't know enough about the China environment to make a projection on it. But if everything goes as expected, and Alibaba runs their business, the stock market continues to churn along, I see 276 for Alibaba. All right, guys, let me know what you think about this Alibaba price projection. Appreciate everybody's support. Give the video a like if you enjoyed it. We'll see you on the next one.